Welcome to Identity Unboxed, where we provide mentorship and promote representation for Black professionals in the advancement of the Black community.
We are seeking guidance from exceptional Black leaders, scholars, and professionals with expertise in their respective fields.
We hope to foster a space that promotes authenticity, inclusivity, and restoration for our listeners while exploring the intersection of our personal and professional lives.
This project is a culmination of our lived experiences as young Black professionals to transform our life trajectories, to overcome adversity and reach triumph.
Our intention is to inspire you on your path to discovering your purpose.
Well, good morning, Dr. Johnson. Thank you so much for joining us today for this episode of Identity Unboxed. You are an inspiring leader, an inspiring public servant. You are the president of Hope Unlimited. You served as the inaugural director of the Washington State Office of Equity. You've taught graduate level courses, and you've served on numerous community boards. I remember when we met in Tumwater, Washington, when you were doing your consulting work regarding racial equity, diversity, and inclusion. And it's just been so inspiring to watch your journey and look up to you and see you transcend throughout your career. So thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it. And we can get kicked off with our first question. Throughout your career, you've proven to be a trailblazer. What has motivated you to push through adversity and break so many glass ceilings?
Well, first of all, Brad, I just have to say congrats to you, new Master of Public Administration graduate, woohoo, proud of you and those like you getting that accomplishment and just for making a difference in the world is what keeps me going. You know, it's funny you should ask me that first question. I'm here in the great state of New York, going through my dad's home, and I felt like I was in the Black History, American History Museum. And what motivated me to really push past the adversity and break so many glass ceilings is I didn't know that there was adversity and I didn't know there were glass ceilings. Matter of fact, when the book Breaking the Glass Ceiling was placed on my desk in 1997, I was already what you will refer to now as the chief operating officer of a VA in Pennsylvania, in Altoona, Pennsylvania. And I didn't even know that there was a glass ceiling. And you know, my dad, I found this letters to God. They would always read to my brothers and me. And it says, "For the love of God are we chosen to render unto him his just due, eternal devotion, respect and love, Jesus, others, yourself." And he got that from a book by, I'm not sure who it was by, but it was entitled I Am Third. It was a Gale Sayers story as a football player. And he talked about keeping God first, others, and yourself. And that was just something that I learned as a little girl that I always did. So with hope and vision, I didn't know that I couldn't, like the bumblebee. Nobody told the bumblebee that it can't fly, so it flies. Nobody didn't tell me that I couldn't do it, so I did it, because Dad said I could. He was my inspiration.
Wow, that's amazing. And it's so great to hear that you were able to find that confidence within yourself to really pursue your dreams. And you didn't really think about a glass ceiling because you set your sights high and you really made that plan to get there.
Well, you know, I found, Dad, I forgot I had written a story in a book entitled Refined by Fire, Discovering Victory Through Adversity. And my story in this book was about being processed for prophetic purpose, meaning we want to be a doctor. We just don't come out of our mother. We just don't decide we want to be a doctor and become a doctor. We have to go through the process of preparation. And as we continue the conversation and even preparing for today's conversation, I realized, wow, my whole life was preparation for my calling and what I'm doing now to seek justice for all and be the architect for just nations and generations.
Wow. Dr. J, may I ask now, you said, you don't plan to be a doctor or to hold, position of the director of Office of Equity for the first Office of Equity in Washington State. I mean, can you tell us a little bit about what some of those pivotal moments in your life have been that led you to kind of plan out your career trajectory?
Yes, there were several. One was I went past the church, Eden Baptist Church here, the other day, where as a 10-year-old, I was listening to the story about somebody named Jesus who loved me in heaven and all this. And I remember thinking, well, who? And give it an invitation to come to know him. Like, well, who I want to know him. And going up there, he said, baptized. Well, as a child, they're like, you know what? Do you know what you're doing? And so they took my parents and queried me, and I was baptized. And little did I know that was significant. And the very first thing I learned was, well, with God, all things are possible. This is a little girl, so I had no concept of not being able to, right? And then I remember in high school, Dad gave me, and I thought it was 11th grade, but it was freshman year, for my birthday in October, a book entitled Robert's Rules of Order. And I love to read, so I read that book along with, by that point, I had already read The Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison and The Spook Who Sat by the Door. And if you haven't read those books, I would highly encourage you, because he was teaching me Black history all along and I didn't know it. So Robert's Rules of Order was very helpful because I was the president of our class every single year. I beat Steve Cardamone every year and decided, let Steve be the president of senior class. That means I didn't give the speech at graduation, but I became student council president. And learning Robert's Rules of Order, how government systems meetings run, was critical for my journey. Now, I had planned to be a capitalist all my life, quite truthfully, from the party of Lincoln. I was going to make money since I could, but a significant event occurred in college when I started dating this guy who was what I would just call just a straight up liberal Democrat, and my whole system of thinking changed. So I didn't become the Wall Street lawyer that I had planned to become. Instead, I became an occupational therapist. Major shift in my life to be. And then when it came for graduate school, I figured no problem, I could do the MBA law school route, get back to being a Wall Street lawyer. But my heart was touched with, no, I really want to be a public servant. And that's why I chose the Masters of Public Administration, the MPA, instead of the MBA. And this was a major prayer moment for me. I had to stop and really, really count the cost and think about who I was and what I wanted to do. And what was in me, in my heart, it won out over what was in my mind. And that was pivotal. When I went on to get the master's, I was told that I wasn't accepted. I'm thinking, well, that's what my letter says. Well, you're accepted conditionally. Well, I don't see that in writing. And I didn't realize until decades later that I was discriminated against when I went to get the master's, because they're expecting someone with my resume and pedigree to be white. So when I showed up, Dr. Lucy Wilson was the academic vice president of academic affairs at Old Dominion University. Her husband, Harrison B. Wilson, was president of Norfolk State University. And I later found out, when the Dallas Cowboys were not going to make the Super Bowl, that Russell Wilson, former quarterback for the Seattle Seahawks, is their grandchild. And I realized I was discriminated against. And Dr. Lucy Wilson intervened for me, because when I went to register for classes that fall, that particular dean was gone. And I never knew why she was gone. And I received the call to go and register for classes that fall. I realized didn't even know I was discriminated against. And that was pivotal. And see, my whole life was like that. I had probably been discriminated against all my life and all my career opportunities, and did not know it until I gave up my career in 1997, which was critical, was ordained as a minister gave away my money, my family, my career, my possessions, moved to the Pacific Northwest to be called out of my name, treated less than a child of God, and had a first-hand experience with what racism really was for real.
Mm-hmm.
Pivotal
Wow.
life experiences. And throughout it, it was my faith in God and vision for a world where everyone really is who they're supposed to be. And we work together in a democracy where there is liberty, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness for all, for real.
Yeah.
Those were the pivotal moments.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that and sharing how your faith really guided you to follow your true passion and realizing that it's okay to change your mind on what your career may be or what your goals may be, and that they will evolve based on your experiences and those people you meet. And I think it leads great into our next question about you deciding on the public sector. And according to a report from the Economic Policy Institute, Black workers and women have higher employment rates in the state and local public sector. This causes disproportionate harm when there are layoffs and budget cuts. On a broad scale, what changes would you like to see to ensure that women and Black people in the workforce are protected from disparate harm?
You know, I've been thinking about this question since the 1980s.
Wow.
When I was in Hampton, Virginia. As a matter of fact, in the movie Hidden Figures, they show this old tree. Well, that is on the property of the VA where I worked at Hampton, right across from what's now Hampton University, was Hampton Institute back then. But back then, I was in what was then personnel, we now refer to it as human resources. And my assignment was as the employee development specialist, which meant I did all the trainings and career counseling and all that for about 3,000 employees, as well as served as their equal employment opportunity technical advisor. Both were 2 full-time jobs, and back then was responsible for things like discrimination complaints, their affirmative action program, upward mobility, dealt with people with disabilities, disabled veterans, and the like. And I remember sitting at my desk in the 1980s, thinking about something that Dr. King had said prior. And he said, you cannot legislate love. You can't legislate morality or make anybody love me through a law. But the law is important because it will keep you from killing me. And I remember thinking about how difficult, well, actually, it was very easy to prove discrimination in Virginia. When I was there, it was very easy to prove on the surface. Prima facie is what we called it. But I remember thinking, if we really are going to be a society of equality, we're going to have to change our heart. Our heart toward one another is what's really going to have to change. And I remember thinking then in the 1980s, wow, God, I'm sure you have a plan. I'm glad it's not for me to deal with, because, we
Right.
That wasn't my career path.
Mm-hmm.
But it was in that setting, though, that I was given the opportunity to develop as a manager. And as part of this, it was a 40-hour, 1 week per quarter, 40 hours. Well, it was more like 80 hours worth of training in that 40-hour week in some city in the nation. And what I learned was more about myself than I wanted to know, because we had to take all kinds of psychological tests and meet with a psychiatrist and, oh my God, group work. And I remember Billy Hightower, he said, if you don't ever remember anything, remember these 3 words: trust the process. That was number 1. And he also said, if you really want to own a flower shop, then just resign now and go do that. So I went ahead and turned in my resignation, not because I wanted to own a flower shop, but because I wanted to teach graduate students like Brad. And the head of the hospital ripped up my resignation and said, get back out to make a difference. Wow. And when I became the COO, I was in training in Ann Arbor, Michigan, to be a hospital administrator in the Department of Veterans Affairs. And I felt like that's not my call. This is not my calling. I need to be making a difference in the lives of young Black students. I want to be a mentor, a teacher. And I went in to resign. And Ed Gamache, I'll never forget, he's like, Johnson, Dr. J, get back out there and make a and it was those critical moments where these two white men said, oh, no. You are not giving up. You're going to stick it through. And through those experiences, well, this is the adversity. The adversity was really within myself and growing and giving myself permission to fail, to learn, to grow, to love, to feel, to succeed. Because until we deal with the fear of success, we are limiting our own selves. That making sense to y'all?
Yeah.
That makes so
Definitely.
much. No, that makes so much sense. And I feel like it speaks so well to our common experience where because we have so much outside pressure on us, to show up in this world and be our best selves and to break those glass ceilings, even when it's subconscious, we often limit ourselves and our mind because of that fear, that self-inflicted fear and the pressure that we put on ourselves. We feel like we have to fit in a box and we often go one route, but we find our hearts tugging at us like, is this your passion? Is this your calling? And I think it's so inspirational that you've used your wisdom in that experience, found your calling to be helping young Black folk and the young Black students that are going through that same struggle of, learning to feel, learning, that it's okay to fail, that failures lead to the successes. A no somewhere is a yes somewhere else. That's all that means.
Right. I'm so glad you asked this public service question because this is critical. I had an assignment and I realized that, oh my goodness, they're more concerned about the money than the people that we're here to serve.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I wanted to get my master's degree, Tiana and Brad. That's why I'm like, you know what? Then let me go ahead and run the organization and put the people first, because public and service means we are there to serve others and not ourselves. And I really would love to see in this century, because this is last century, that we begin to put public and service back into the work. And that was really one of the legacies I hope I was able to at least leave or start putting in place in that role as an inaugural director of the Washington State Office of Equity. As public servants, how are we going to serve the public if we don't ask them? And particularly as we're trying to achieve equity, telling people who have traditionally been marginalized, oppressed, and left out and left behind what they need is not helping. That's status quo. If we're really going to reframe state government to work in a way that's equitable and just for all, then let's go not only ask them, how about let's go hire them and let them do the work. Let's just hire them. We don't need more focus groups. Let's just go hire the people who know what to do.
Yeah.
Do it.
Wow. No, I love that you point out how important it is to have representation and to connect directly with the communities that you're trying to help. I feel like a lot of times these decisions are being made isolated from the communities that you're impacting. And if you really want to make tangible change, you need to hear from those people in those communities, tell you what they need.
I am out of state, like I said, and so I've been doing a lot thank God for DoorDash. And it's a wonderful food at this Chinese restaurant, Yummy Garden. I'm going to give them a shout out. Because I'm looking at their menu, and when I saw we speak Spanish, I'm like, you go ahead. People say we speak Spanish, so come on. And that's what I really see is needed across state government, federal public sector. We see you, we hear you. We don't want you to come in and be like, oh, no. We're here to relate to you.
Exactly. I feel and I see in the public sector that that's so needed. And this is something me and Tiana have talked about in our private conversations. I love the point that you made about, we have the focus groups, we know the problems, and it's like, Yeah, one day me and Tiana were just walking downtown Seattle and we're like, we're sick of all these organizations saying they're creating space. Like, we have the space now. So
Yes.
when are we gonna take the feedback from those focus groups, those safe spaces, the
Yeah.
forums and the conversations, and actually turn that into action and show people that we're here for them and that we see them? And so I love that point that you made. And I feel like that goes well into our next question, because I feel like as public servants, we're getting into the realm of getting into that good trouble so that we can actually be actionable about what we want to do. And in your prior work as a diversity consultant in the public sector, you've often coined the phrase good trouble. Can you share the significance behind this phrase and what it means to you?
Well, I did not coin the phrase. Representative John Lewis coined the phrase. And, you know, right, we don't need any more focus groups. We don't need any more reports. We don't need any more data. All that I call that chequity. We already know there's a problem.
I love that term. That's a good one.
And so the Office of Equity was established in April 2020. Representative Mia Gregerson was a sponsor of our bill. She asked Representative Melanie Morgan to champion the bill, and Senator Monica Dingra was the sponsor in the Senate. Governor signed it April 2020. If you remember, in May 2020, we were all locked in for COVID, and the world had the opportunity to watch Mr. George Floyd being murdered on national television. I remember that day vividly. As a matter of fact, I was sleeping on the floor by choice. I woke up that day, turned on the television to see in my face screen filled with this white man, police officer, who had a smirk on his face, his hand in his pocket, and his knee on a black man's neck. Now, I thought maybe perhaps I was in the wrong place. And then I started to ask myself, what I know. I stopped. I'm like, of course, we're in America, law enforcement. Remember, this was the first slave patrol. That's their root, their heritage. Yeah. First slave patrol. Oh, of course, he believes that he can kill a black man with impunity. And so what's going to happen next is one or two things. He's going to say, either I was, one, in fear of my life, or two, he resisted arrest. So Officer Chauvin, I think his name was Chauvin, he chose the latter. Mr. Floyd was resisting arrest. At least that's what the report from the Minneapolis Police Department said, until the video showed up that told the truth. And the rest, as we say, is history. That was May. Following that, in July, Representative John Lewis died. And this is very significant to me because I just got to Montgomery in 2019 to see the preview of a movie, Just Mercy, that Brian Stevenson had put together to talk about the racism in incarceration. And while in Montgomery, I went to Selma, and I walked the Edmund Pettus Bridge as far as I could from Selma to Montgomery, because Dr. King thought that was a failure. And so I'm like, well, let me here in the 21st century walk this as far as I can, thinking maybe this will help us in our generation. And I had a sense that Representative Lewis was not well, because you see, it's at that bridge that he was beat unconscious. And so I did the best I could to connect with him, was unsuccessful. And so when he passed away in July, I was mortified that I did not get a chance to, one, pray with him, and two, let him know that when he passed, his death would not be in vain. I was going to continue the legacy. So now you can imagine my shock and awe when I'm in the Cap watching the ceremonies, laying in rest. I'm not even sure if he was the first congressperson to lay in rest at the Capitol Rotunda. Might have been, but that was the first Black. And to hear his voice that day was powerful. If you could play that clip, I'd really appreciate that, please.
Yes, very powerful.
Others experience what I experienced. This
Yeah.
is July 2020,
Yes.
2 months after Mr. Floyd is murdered.
I grew up in rural Alabama, 50 miles from Montgomery, outside of a little place called Troy. My father was a sharecropper, a tenant farmer. But back in 1944, when I was only 4 years old, my father had saved $300. And with the $300, he bought 110 acres of land. My family still own that land today. How many of you remember when you were 4? What happened to the rest of us? It was many, many years ago. We would visit the little town of Troy, visit Montgomery, visit Tuskegee, visit Birmingham. I saw those signs that said white men, colored men, white women, colored women, white waiting, colored waiting. I would come home and ask my mother, my father, my grandparents, my great-grandparents why. They would say, that's the way it is. Don't get in the way. Don't get in trouble. But one day in 1955, 15 years old, in the 10th grade, I heard about Rosa Parks. I heard the words of Martin Luther King Jr. on our radio. 1957, I met Rosa Parks at the age of 17. In 1958, at the age of 18, I met Martin Luther King Jr., and these two individuals inspired me to get in the way, to get in trouble. So I come here to say to you this morning, on this beautiful campus, with your great education, you must find a way to get in the way. You must find a way to get in trouble, good trouble, necessary trouble. Use your education. You have wonderful teachers, wonderful professors, researchers. Use what you have. Use your learning. Use your tools to help make our country and make our world a better place where no one will be left out or left behind. You can do it and you must do it. It is your time. In a few short days, we will commemorate what we call the Mississippi Summer Project. For more than 1,000 students from all over America, many from abroad, made a trip to Mississippi to encourage people to register to vote. And the summer night of June 21st, 1964, 3 young men that I knew, 2 whites and 1 African American, Nicholas Werner, Andy Goodman, and James Shaney, went out to investigate the burning of an African American church that was used for voter registration workshop. These 3 young men were detained by the sheriff, taken to jail, taken out of jail, turned over to the Klan, where they were beaten, shot, and killed. And I tell students today, these 3 young men didn't die in Vietnam. They didn't die in the Middle East or Eastern Europe. They didn't die in Africa or Central or South America. They died right here in our own country, trying to help all of our citizens become participants in the democratic process. As young people, you must understand that there are forces that want to take us back to another period. But you must say that we're not going back. We made too much progress and we're going forward. There may be some setbacks, some delays, some disappointment, but you must never, ever give up or give in. You must keep the faith and keep your eyes on the prize. That is your calling. That is your mission. That is your moral obligation. That is your mandate. Get out there and do it. Get in the way. In the final analysis, we all must learn to live together as brothers and sisters. We all live in the same house. And it doesn't matter whether we are black or white, Latino, Asian American, or Native American. It doesn't matter whether you're straight or gay. We're one people, we're one family. We all live in the same house. Be bold. Be courageous. Stand up. Speak up. Speak out. And find a way to create the beloved community, the beloved world, a world of peace, a world that recognizes the dignity of all humankind. Never become bitter, never become hostile, never hate, live in peace. We're one people, and one love. Thank you very much.
Yes, so very powerful. Thank you so much, Dr. J, for sharing that. There's so many valuable pieces in that speech that you can really pull on and start to figure out how we can move towards that beloved community and do that in good trouble, to never back down, to continue to allow yourself to find what guides you and find how you can really further diversity, equity, and inclusion through achieving social justice efforts. And Dr. J, if you have any thoughts you'd like to share on that when it comes to applying good trouble in your work, feel free to elaborate.
Yes. I just wanted us to take a minute to just pause, particularly for those who were listening to this for maybe perhaps the first time.
Yeah.
Because if it impacted them like it impacted me, they're going to have to come back to the rest of this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Because you see, by the time he said that, I felt vindicated and valid. I'm like, well, those are my marching orders to continue exactly the course I'm on.
Mm-hmm.
And for you and Brad and your generation, getting out there, getting in the way is not only a must, people like me are depending on you to do it.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that voting is not a universal right in this nation is criminal.
Mm-hmm.
and exposes the hypocrisy in the words in the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. And yet they are still hope, and yet we're still going to fight for them, and that's how you can get out there and get in good trouble.
Mm-hmm.
One way I got in good trouble is even around the term DEI. I didn't use that.
Mm-hmm.
I was not the director of the Office of DEI. That was HR assignment. We were on pro-equity, anti-racism. Why? Because with the 60,000 employees across the state of Washington, not one was identical to another. And so we didn't need any diversity goals. We were already diverse.
Mm-hmm.
Inclusion into what? A misogynistic, racist, oppressive system? I think not.
Mm-hmm.
We belong here because we already belong here. So we weren't trying to be included into a structure that didn't even want people who look like us to be citizens of this land.
Right.
So that's how I chose to get into good, necessary trouble. And you and Brad and others, the sound of my voice, I'm encouraging you too, because words matter. And as I was going through Dad's house today, I found 3 articles from 1992. One is from Dr. King, and I was reminded that he said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Now, if you've heard, I know Brad is shaking his head. No, he's heard me say this almost every time he sees. So when I was confronted with this newspaper in my dad's attic, I'm like, see, I don't have no choice but to do it, say what I say. Mm-hmm. And depending on good trouble, wherever there's injustice around anyone's rights, mm-hmm. human rights is what we're fighting, especially the rights of Black people. Get out right now, organize a campaign and get somebody down there in Georgia to be outside of Fulton County Courthouse every single day to support PA Willis and what she's doing. Let's get here and start making sure that If a governor can say, you loot, we shoot, well, what about looting our books? Do we need to shoot you too? No, because what did Michelle Obama say? When we go low, when they go low, we go high.
We go high. Yep.
My dad's addict, next one, Frederick Douglass, who said, it's not light that's needed, but fire. It's not the gentle shower, but thunder. We need the storm, the whirlwind, and the earthquake. And he had delivered this in 1852 in Rochester, New York, to an audience dealing with slavery at the time. And that's how we can get in good trouble. Don't play small. The days of fitting in, not making waves, those are over. John Lewis, Representative Lewis, get out there and do it. Get in the way. And that's what I'm encouraging everyone to do. And then finally in Dad's Attic today, I found Shirley Chisholm. And here she said to Rochester in 1990, awaken. The time has come when women in America are going to be accepted as women and not as men with missing parts. So stop being shrinking violets. Say to the men in your lives, I love you, but get out of my way because I'm on a mission. And if anybody has ever forgotten that sexism is right there with racism, we're bound to repeat history because as the representative said, there are forces that are trying to take us back to slavery. And I would want everyone to read what I find in Dad's office or home, How to Keep a Black Man Down from One Slave Plantation Owner to Another. He got this in 1994. We now know this book entitled The Making of a Slave by Willie Lynch. And we're going to really get in some good trouble. Then let's study and learn how this system was built to be very strategic in our plans and organizations and mobilizations to begin to dismantle it for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness for all.
Wow.
So those are my thoughts on getting in good trouble.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing how important it is for us to understand our history and how these systems have excluded marginalized communities, and understanding how the forces of intersectionality affect how people are able to navigate the world and achieve their dreams and goals. And I really appreciate that quote you shared. A threat to justice anywhere is an injustice everywhere. And that's so important to understand the gravity of what that means. And I think it really ties into this discussion around the pushback on DEI efforts in states like Texas and Florida, where they're removing Black history from schools. They're removing, AP African American history. Those were courses. I mean, as a high school student, I would have loved to learn. I remember growing up and not really knowing much about Black history until I got to college at the UW, and I took an amazing course. It was a race and American history course. It was the first time that I really learned about, the Black Panthers and Malcolm X, and understanding how to really advance racial justice. And through that, we need to understand how these systems were comprised to exclude us and to not allow us to thrive, and using that knowledge to create systems that allow us to fully belong. And like Martin Luther King shared, the beloved community, of really doing that through love and connecting with each other and uplifting those that have been marginalized and socioeconomically disadvantaged, and disadvantaged through identities, and just really trying to push for a society where we all have a fair chance.
And remembering that system for people back to the 1980s, back to Hampton, Virginia, I was there pondering, systems, change the system. Well, I'm thinking, wait a minute, systems are made up of people. And this one is comprised of European slavers who left Europe, came here, decided they weren't going to be European, but it would be whiteness and white supremacy. I talk about hoods, but white supremacy to determine one's place in a social hierarchy. Who is the authority to do that? Mm-hmm. And thus it all began, because all men are created equal. They meant all aristocratic white men. That's exactly what they meant. Yeah. And when Abraham Lincoln said, "Oh no, we the people's all the people," well, he was assassinated. Mm-hmm. And So the story goes, and that's the fight today.
Mhm.
And we're here to say, oh no, we belong here.
Yeah. Brad, oh, sorry.
My Earth suit may be a little bit more melanated than yours.
Yeah.
But rest assured, nobody had any input into the Earth suit that they were going to wear on this Earth. So no one should even have the audacity to think that they even can determine who was superior or inferior to anyone when none of us
Yeah.
had a chance to choose how we're going to walk. So this is exciting. Remember, Dr. King, Frederick Douglass, when things like this were seen today happen in their day, they were energized, mobilized, and had hope that there was still an opportunity to live out this democracy.
Yes. Brad, I wanted to allow you to kind of touch on Dr. J's point about creating equitable systems. I know with your prior experience earning your master's in public administration, this is something that you've been really passionate about. So I wanted to give you a chance to kind of touch on that also.
Absolutely. I love the phrase that you used, chequity. That's so funny. And we'll get into that a little later in some later questions, but that's, through getting my master's program, I'm so glad at the Evans School, their curriculum was beginning to incorporate, how race impacts public policy and how public policy impacts the lives of people. And I will never forget, what you said about, the older generations needing us to step up and continue that good fight because, John Lewis is gone. We're losing, so many people and have lost so many people that were so important in the fight for equality for Black folk and beyond. And I'll never forget the impact that you had on me, when we were at that Tumwater School District Board meeting where they had shown the Confederate flag at one of the middle schools and you were speaking up on the issue. And so was I. And seeing that fire that you had only sparked that fire even more in me, seeing a powerful woman with so much grace and knowledge being able to stand up to these powerful people, like you said, in these systems that were not built for us in mind. And, I never had even thought of it that way before you said it, but inclusion for what? Like inclusion into systems that weren't built with us in mind. It's about rebuilding it. And I think it's so important what you touched on, as the younger generations, a lot of times we get fed up. We're like, we're done with this. We don't want to participate. We don't want to be civically engaged. Like we're not going to make any progress, but look at the progress that, we have made through so many people in your generation that fought and were beaten and kicked and went through so much that we could be here today on this podcast with this platform speaking about these things. And so I commend you and all the work that you do seriously, because playing that clip and hearing that about getting in the way, that's what has inspired, me in my, professional trajectory. I've always said, I don't know what I know. I want to be a public servant. I don't know where I'm going to end up, where I'm going to work. But what I know is that I want to use my fire to make that change. Like we touched on in the past, we have enough focus groups, we have enough this and that, we have all the data. When are we going to make the change? And I really feel like when it comes to passing the torch, as you continue to be a mentor for young Black students, I feel like, I don't want to say we owe it to you, but in a way, you and, people of your stature and, activists across the country have paved the way for us to be able to, step on that stepping stone to take it even further. And so I hope that you see that within us. And I hope that, we continue to make you proud in the same way that you make us proud and the way you inspire us. So.
Well, you're very generous in your remarks, and I'm already proud of you and Tiana and your generation. And so but remember, I'm a little bit younger of those who actually gave their lives.
Oh yeah,
I was a beneficiary of their work.
Mm-hmm.
My question is, what has our generation done such that your generation? We're right back now. I'm not even quite sure if we're the 1960s. I really think we're in the 1800s.
Yeah. It feels like it sometimes.
Back in 1619, and what are we going to do? So I honor you as you all honor me. I'm just doing what I was called to do, and I'm here to encourage you all to do what you're called to do too. And see, I'm proud of both of you for even doing this, because you are using your gift. See, here's what I love about y'all. You're using your gift to do what you can do, as opposed to wringing your hands over what you can't do.
Right.
And what you're doing is you're going to reach everyone, all generations. Anybody who wants to be about Identity Unboxed, they're in. That's the gift that I want you all to continue to cultivate. It's because we're going to all hands on deck. We need each and every unique person to be their unique self, doing what they do, not what somebody else does, because it's teamwork that makes the dream work. And that's really why I'm excited about Gen Z. As a matter of fact, it's almost as if your generation said, you know what, parents, go ahead and deal with your issues. You and your issues. As a matter of fact, your issues are not our issues. We're setting boundaries. So we're going to go ahead and start rebuilding society. Well, y'all go ahead and do what you're going to do. And I appreciate that. And you're going to do it with whomever is about the babies, is about the children, which is about liberty and justice for all. And your contemporaries, Representatives Justins, Pearson and Johnson there in Tennessee, are classic examples of how you all are showing up in your everyday life. So I honor you and encourage you to get out there. And Dad always said, now, Karen, if you're not prepared to die for something, you're not prepared to live. So I'm going to challenge you to start thinking about, well, what is it that you're prepared to die for? Now, when he said that to me, I was prepared to die for anything or anyone.
Aren't you young? We have too much life to live. We're not ready.
You don't get this twisted. We've had some major issues going on. That's why they had to rip up by resignations, because I was trying to be the caterpillar, trying to get myself out of the cocoon. I wasn't trying to go through the metamorphosis. But that's a critical question. What are you prepared to die for? And then once you're good with that, there we go.
Tune in next week to hear part 2 of this episode. Thank you so much for listening to Identity Unboxed.
We are so grateful for your support, and thank you for listening to Identity Unboxed.
Authenticity is your guide to cast an impact on the world that you will be proud of. Signing off with pride, Tiana
and Brad.
Thank you so much.